The Metaverse is emerging as the next big technology platform and promises to be the next frontier for human experiences on the internet. Into the Metaverse covers companies, technologies, and trends that are bringing these promises to life. Join creator and host Jonathan Ross Friedman, founder and CEO of Super Social, as he interviews the brilliant minds that are building, shaping, and investing in the Metaverse.
Welcome to Into the Metaverse for our weekly show today. I'm here with Lisa. Lisa, great to see you. How's your weekend?
It was great. Thank you so much. Great to see you. I'm here in New York. Always fun to take a trip across the country.
Yeah, it's getting colder for sure, but I'm sure it's nice to visit. All right, so we have a few items. It's been quite a busy week last week and the last few days. So what are we covering today?
Well, Jan, since we last spoke, President Biden signed an executive order about AI, and he's not waiting for lawmakers to do something. He's not waiting for companies to do it on their own. It's a pretty dense document. He has so many things in there, focusing on fraud and privacy. But it does seem that it's very future looking. It doesn't really seem to have protections for ChatGPT and Bard and some of the things that have already been invented.
I think it's a great step that they've made. It's obviously a very thoughtful, very comprehensive executive order. I think it covers a lot of things that people are afraid from an existential standpoint. You see how the executive order kind of raises the alarm of, if anything, that can be really transformative negatively. Companies should report what is happening to the government. But to your point, and I actually want to quote the last sentence from what Tim O'Reilly has said about the executive order, and we actually published a great episode with Tim last week on the podcast. So it was a great timing to talk to Tim about AI. But he basically said that, in short, and I'm quoting, in short, the big AI companies have hit a home run in heading off any effective regulation for some years to come. That's the bottom line from Tim, which I tend to agree with, because I think what's clear is that the executive order really talks about the long-term potential existential ramifications of AI. But to your point, it doesn't really deal with what are we going to do tomorrow with tools like ChatGPT, Bard, which are absolutely already changing and morphing, not just human endeavor and creativity, but it will ultimately evolve pretty rapidly to impact the way we think, what we know. So there's all of these interesting challenges that the executive order doesn't address. And it could well be because the White House was convinced by big tech companies that these are not things to be worried about. It could be that the White House thought that these are important areas, but the White House should not intervene and get involved in. And it could all come from potentially either I wouldn't say lack of understanding of ChatGPT and Bard and technologies like that are already here, but most likely a lack of or underappreciation of the magnitude of what these tools already do today and in the near term. So all in all, I think it's great that there is an executive order. I love the fact that they have a whole website now that attracts and encourages government agencies to hire AI talent across design, engineering, and so on and so forth. I think that's great. But to Tim's point, it seems like they've missed the mark on what are we doing today and how are the existing tools that may not pose imminent danger to humanity tomorrow, but are definitely impacting significantly already workforce, socially. And I think what's interesting, especially after what social media has done to the world, it did a lot of good. It connected people. It brought people together for sure. I don't think anyone remembers life before Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and so on and so forth. But what it also does, it created misinformation and fake information that really is hurting, I would say, Western civilization. And it's hard not to think about what's happening with AI and what are the ramifications of AI in the near term, especially as big technology companies really all deploy AI now into their platforms. So hopefully this executive order will ebb and flow and will include more things as they unravel themselves. But it is some sort of a miss of an opportunity that they're not addressing existing technologies today.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's notable that they include the Department of Homeland Security. So you have to just like sit and think about that for a minute too, really these existential threats like you're talking about. In terms of another government trying to tackle AI, the UK had a big summit with all the tech leaders. Rishi Sunak had a session with Elon Musk that has gotten some attention. I think that anytime Elon Musk does anything now, there's some eye rolls, and it's been called a media stunt. I don't know how productive or unproductive it actually was, but the UK is trying now to also get in on the AI game. And one notable thing I saw was that Elon Musk got a little bit personal and was talking about his son with this fear of these AI agents. And he had said his son struggles a bit, and he thinks it would be great if his son could have an AI friend. So it's interesting, the sort of the positives and the negatives and how our society will adapt to this, but the UK now taking it on.
Well, I think definitely it's funny because 6 years ago I started a company and I worked in it for a couple of years, but it was too early, where the vision was to develop sort of AI companions for young people to grow with. I think it's scary what it can do, but I think it's inevitable. I believe we will see technologies like AI being incorporated across everything we have and everything we do. It's just a matter of time. The UK is definitely, I've had the pleasure of living in London for almost 5 years, and I think the UK has been working quite hard over the past decade plus to position itself as a tech giant as well. And the AI Safety Summit that the UK government held in no other than Bletchley Park, which is where Alan Turing cracked the code of the Enigma in World War II. And so it's a very interesting location that they chose for this summit. And, I think it's part of the UK striking to really be relevant is this new era of technology. And the heritage of computing invention is definitely in the UK. If you think about Tim Berners-Lee, who, really brought the internet to life out of the woodwork. And if you think about Bletchley Park and what happened in World War II, if you think about the history of computing, Ada Lovelace, and so on and so forth. So the UK has a heritage and history of invention in technology in general, not just computing, but computing especially. And so it's not a surprise that the UK is investing a lot. And this opportunity to bring Elon Musk, reading the news and what was covered and seeing some elements of that on the broadcast on Twitter, I choose to call X still Twitter. It felt like there wasn't much depth to the conversation with Elon Musk. It almost felt like the UK Prime Minister is kind of having a great media opportunity, which is not a bad thing. I think the main thing was that summit and the role that the UK wants to play globally in safeguarding AI and the role it plays. And it's interesting that it happened in the same week or in the same few days as the executive order from President Biden. And so we are really continuing to be at the very early beginning of this transformation. And I think we saw it with the Metaverse, how governments and places like Dubai, United Arab Emirates, Japan, Korea, making major investments in Metaverse. I think we're seeing it now with AI. We're living in an incredible wave of new technologies that are emerging at the same time. And it is no surprise that governments understand that. And I would say one of the things that I care about a lot and that I believe in is that technology is really playing an incredible role in shaping the world we live in. And I think we need to be very careful with how we use technology because it impacts not just socially, it impacts politically, economically. And, I think we have such a fragile society around the world at the moment with kind of two headstrong positions of what the world should look like from a society perspective. And technology is playing a key role in that already for the past 15, 20 years. And I think we need to make sure that we build technologies that are going to safeguard, civilization and human values that we all share for the past 75 years after World War II. And I think technology should be a part of the solution. We just need to be conscious of its dangers, but focus on building things that matter and can really make a positive, meaningful impact on people's lives.
Yes, it is exploding so quickly. And to that point, this week we should get a look at a new device. November 9th is supposedly a launch of a super secretive startup called Humane. And they're to be releasing an AI pin, which apparently I think you just wear on your shirt. and it's going to have cameras and microphones and be, one step forward. I think the good part is maybe gets us, to stop looking down at our phones and look up a little bit. But it also feels a little bit like a privacy nightmare to wear a pin with cameras and microphones as you walk around.
Well, look, I think it's a really interesting story about the company Humane, which was founded by Imran and his co-founder, both of whom were, quite senior at Apple. And Imran was a key designer on Jony Ive's team, designing the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad. And so he's a, incredible creator, obviously. I have only seen the demo of what was on TED that they published earlier this year. And it does seem like it's kind of a first stab at what a post-smartphone era of computing could look like. I know a lot of people talk about VR and AR, but these are not yet popularized or becoming a mainstream mass market product. Look, an AI-enabled device that doesn't have a screen, that is voice controlled, that you look on the palm of your hand to control the interface. I think it's a novel bet on the future of computing. I am personally skeptic about the device. I am not skeptic because I know exactly what the device is going to be. I am just skeptic that type of form factor and modality of interaction in a world where I believe these devices are still the dominant form factor for human-computer interaction, I think it's probably too early for us to see the next evolution of personal computing. And that's why I'm skeptic. I don't think it's VR headsets, at least not in the next 5 to 10 years. And I'm also skeptic that a tiny pen on our shirt or jacket that is voice controlled, that can show a screen on any surface, unless it's something that really is going to be incredibly compelling for people, I find that it's... look, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong because I think Imran is an incredible visionary. I hope I'm wrong. But I feel like it may be closer to the Google Glass than to being like the next iPhone. I hope not. I hope it's the next invention of computing. I tend to feel like it's a great stab. It's a great invention. But to think that potentially is going to be a new iPhone moment of a new consumer electronic device, I'm a bit skeptic. I think it will end up being a novel computing device that will have a certain level of fandom across computer electronics consumers, but I don't see that product being an iPhone moment of a post-smartphone era.
It does, though, seem to be getting smaller, and I still think that it could be a contact lens one day. One day might be in our eye, right?
Yeah, and that's interesting, right? Because these devices are only getting bigger. They're only getting like more and more computers in our hands. And, I think that the notion of having a seamless interface in front of our eyes at all times, it makes form factors like glasses or contact lenses in our eyes way more compelling versus something that I'm going to look at. If I'm already going to look at the palm of my hand, why would I not just look at this?
Right.
Like I would probably choose this. My palm is like there's a lot going on there,
Yeah,
This is
true.
so, and probably it's just like, what if my hands is wet, or that's kind of where I'm struggling with the form factor. But look, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because I'm an entrepreneur. I love to invent as well. I think there is a lot to like about their vision. I am pessimistic that particular invention is going to be the innovation that will commercialize a post-smartphone era of computing. I think it will be one of the steps that could be interesting in giving us a lens to what the future might be. But I don't see anything yet out there, and I don't have my own idea yet of what is going to kind of take out iPhone and big smartphones from continuing to be the key modality of interaction between humans and computers. But hey, let's see. I mean, if it goes big, you can tell me, Jan, you're totally wrong, and I'd love to be wrong. But if you're putting me against the wall and ask me, Jan, what do you think? I think it's a novelty. I don't see that as a mass-consumed item that will sell 100 million units plus over the next 3 to 4 years.
Well, we'll see. To be continued, right? To be continued. So, in terms of the world of art and artists and AI, DALL-E 3 was released in September and was really impressive in terms. Everyone spoke a lot about the hands. The hands now suddenly seem more real in these generative art pieces, and I noticed the expressions and the interactions between two people. You could really sort of read emotions now for the first time, but artists are getting more and more frustrated and feeling more and more exploited. And in terms, especially of their art being used to train AI models and how they can avoid that or find compensation for that. So there's a couple softwares working on that. One, Nightshade, that's being released, seems a little controversial. It basically is taking the art, tweaking some of the pixels, so it's basically sabotaging the AI model training for these artists. Sort of interesting. It feels a lot like a vigilante. Take the law into your own hands, or the society into your own hands, and sabotage the AI training.
I think the bigger question is how technologies developed by companies like OpenAI, if it's DALL-E 3 in this case, that is according to a lot of artists, is using their creations to train the models that allow us to in a few clicks to get a visual representation of our imagination through the DALL-E software. I think the bigger question is, how are we going to use technology in a way that makes sure the economic upside of what is being created can be shared with other people who are part of the creation ecosystem in training the models, right? And I think it goes back to a similar question we've been asking over the past few years of the difference between a centralized platform and a user-owned platform. And I think I started to see on Twitter now that they're starting to potentially give percentage of advertising to creators who make content on Twitter. And, we're seeing platforms like Roblox where creators build content and monetize with their content. So I think there is the bigger question of, as the internet is evolving to its next phase, how all of these technologies are going to ensure that the people who are part of the wider creator ecosystem, in the case of DALL-E 3 and learning models that learn on top of everything on the internet, I think the question to me is not should they do it. I think the question is, how do they do it while providing economic incentives to everyone that was part of building those capabilities of the software. And I think that will have major implication on workforce and how people make a living across multiple jobs and areas of professionalism. It will have impact on copyrights. We already saw that, according to what I've seen from most recent legal reviews, things that you write using ChatGPT cannot be copyrighted. I would assume that would apply to what is being created with DALL-E 3, Midjourney, and so on and so forth. And I think the way out of that is to allow copyrighted, but in a way that can incentivize people who were part of training the models. And I think any company that is doing so would probably be wise, and I believe ahead of the curve in actually getting in front of this. And this is something also I spoke to Tim O'Reilly about, and I think he's a big proponent of how do we make sure that people can be incentivized for what they're creating that help train these models. And I think this is just one example. I think it's going to touch many, many other things as AI is starting to really be rolled out across everything we do. You can imagine on advertising, political campaigns. I mean, no one is going to know unless we have mechanisms and models that attribute ownership and economic incentives to people who are part of training these models, because these models are going to touch everything.
Yeah, that's right. It's such a huge undertaking, but it's ethically appropriate also. So hopefully the companies and maybe this executive order are going to work on that for us. I hope
All right.
So. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
For all the insights.
Thank you for coming today. I'll see you next week.
Great to see you.
Don't forget to like our podcast, share it with your friends, comment. We love to hear your reviews. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Into the Metaverse. We hope you learned a lot and explored new aspects of the Metaverse.